Welcome to Muslims and Mental Health with Sister Heather, a groundbreaking program looking at mental health issues through the biopsychosocial spiritual paradigm.
Welcome to another episode of Muslims and Mental Health. Today we will be joined by Dr. Omar Mahmood. We'll be discussing Ramadan and how children prepare, practice, and can best utilize the month of Ramadan. As we've discussed in a couple of previous episodes, the month of Ramadan is very important to Muslims. It's a month of fasting, introspection, and prayer. It's one of the 5 pillars of Islam. And each day during Ramadan, followers of Islam, known as Muslims, do not eat or drink from sunrise to sunset. And today we're going to discuss a special population of the Muslim community, the children. As we've discussed in a previous episode about Ramadan, we know that people do not start fasting in an obligatory way in Islam until they reach puberty and are able to do so. So children make up a special population of the community during this special month. And I'm joined by Dr. Omar to discuss how children can best utilize this month. Please welcome Dr. Omar with me. Thank you. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
I want to start out by asking you how you feel that Ramadan impacts the lives of children and why it's important to and for children.
Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I think for children, especially the idea of a festival or a holiday season is really salient for a child. They pick up on that right away when there's a special time, of the year. And in countries in the Muslim world, there's a very significant change that children notice. One, maybe they don't even go to school during Ramadan, or school is much more limited. There's a lot more activities focused on, celebration and fun things for the children. So it becomes a very festive and a very happy time, and they associate a lot of happy memories with it. For Muslims living in the West, I think it might be a little bit more subdued simply because we're up against, a dominant culture that does not celebrate Ramadan that as openly. Although more and more you'll see little glimpses of it being recognized and acknowledged, on TV or shopping or, different stores might have a little Ramadan display or sale. So it starts to peek into, just the average person's, daily life. But for most Muslim kids in the West, it's a time where there is that sense of celebration, festivities, but it's just not as obvious, I think. But for children that pick up on it, it can again be a time when they associate a lot of happy memories with it, simply because of the joy and of the sort of the reverence that comes with the month for the general Muslim community. Little children can pick up on that.
Mm-hmm. Great. And so in light of that, we know that you're a neuropsychologist and that you're also a national advisor to MENA, the Muslim Youth of North America. What would you advise parents to do with their children during the month of Ramadan?
I think it's a difficult task when, again, you're living in a non-Muslim majority country. To really pass that on to your child, that the sense of we're in a festive, holy month, without this extra support from the general society of, all the decorations and whatever celebratory things that might be around them. So for Muslim parents, one thing is just kind of really within the family showing that transformation, that this is a holy time, a special time, whether that take the form of decorating the house a certain way, cooking special things a certain way, whatever the activities are of the family during the month, the children should be included in some way to make them feel like they're part of it, and that they have some ownership of it, that, this is something specific to their tradition and something core to the experience of Muslims all around the world that they're taking part in. So I think there's a number of different things that have been coming out in more recent years where there are, children's books, children's games, activities, decorations, a number of different things that Muslim parents now have that probably they didn't have 10, 15 years ago, that are helping. All the paraphernalia related to whether it be lanterns that you hang in Ramadan, posters that you make, displays that you put outside your house to let the neighbors know that you're celebrating Ramadan. These are all things that children can be included in easily, and also, gives them a sense of participation, that they're actively participating.
Yeah, I saw these really cute calendars where the children can have their name stitched on the top of the calendar, and it's like 29 or 30 days of Ramadan. They have stars, and you can take one down for each day, and then they have like little pockets where you can, come up with something to do with your kids. I know personally with my own kids, I had them memorize different things each day, and then I would give them a little treat.
Yeah, no, I think those efforts are great because they, it provides motivation to the child, right, to be active in Ramadan and sort of be constantly aware that they're in Ramadan, and so when you put little incentives like that, those are great ideas. I mean, especially for a young child who maybe doesn't necessarily understand all the concepts of Islamic law and why we do certain things, but they want to be part of it. They want to feel like it's part of their tradition. So any little way that you can increase and encourage participation, make them more motivated, those are great.
Mm-hmm. And so, going along those lines, then, how do you think children can best utilize Ramadan for their own psychological and also their spiritual development?
I think, again, it's going to depend on the age of the child. Some children, if they're young, can only grasp certain concepts, but some children are more mature, and at different ages it may vary from child to child, and each child is an individual person who has their own ways in which they look at the world. So I think each family will have to assess where their children are at, but in general it's a great time for the development of the child when they're trying to figure out one of the main concepts for me in Ramadan that I think is important for children to sort of begin to focus on is the idea of delaying gratitude, right? Like that part of what we do during Ramadan is a disciplinary action for our own nafs, our own ego. And for the child, they're almost entirely, dictated by their nafs at that age. Everything is about what they want, what they desire, and quickly fulfilling those desires. And it's not necessarily done in an evil way. Children don't have that, they don't have the religious responsibility that that an adult has. They're still in a innocent time of their life, but nonetheless they're guided. A lot of their behaviors are guided by these sort of ego-serving motivations, and so being able to train that part of the self and understand that if you can delay your desire to fulfill that whatever need it is you want at that moment, that's a great tool which will benefit you later in life. And so for some children, it may be just a very simple idea of, holding off on a certain reward that they want, and when they actually do get it, to understand the value of that reward at that point. Whereas if they quickly get it, they may not, value it at the same time. So I know some families, even though the child is not of age to be, fasting in a mandatory way, they do these sort of, partial fasts where a child will fast for a few hours, maybe in the morning, and then, break their fast at lunchtime or a little bit after lunchtime, or depending on the age of the child, they could go longer or shorter. But whatever the exercise is, it's very important because it is a training moment for the child to realize, oh, I'm hungry now, but if I wait just a little bit longer, I'm kind of participating in the same act that the grown-ups are doing, which is fasting, and I get, the reward of that afterwards. And it doesn't have to only be eating. It could be any kind of gift or, candy or whatever it is that they want, to be able to train themselves to hold off on getting it for a little bit longer, and then learn how to wait. And then progressively, as the child ages through the years of childhood, all that ability should increase in strength, and you could maybe handle longer periods of time. It's a lot to ask a kid, who's looking at a plate of, sweets to don't eat that for an hour, but to ask
Right.
them, not eat it for 60 seconds, a young child could maybe handle that and, realize where their own strengths and weaknesses are. It's really empowering in that sense too, to learn more about themselves. And then slowly watch that increase, that ability to delay gratification, delay the gratification.
Yeah, I have thought oftentimes about that myself, how nice it is to see children who actually get that training to have had it, because they make it look so easy. As a convert, I remember my first Ramadan, just having, you're an adult, you're doing it all. And it's like, how do people do this? Because you go from 0 to 60 all at once. And so it is nice when you can have been trained, over time to do it, as opposed to starting as an adult and just doing it all at once.
And the ability to delay gratification or, delay a reward, self-imposed, that applies in so many aspects of life, not just in Ramadan, but it's great spiritual training in general for the person to have that skill.
Yeah. So building on that, then in what ways can children be involved in the Muslim community during Ramadan, both between Muslims and then in the broader context of the larger community?
I think there are a number of community efforts, depending on the size of the community, but where children are involved in some way of celebrating the month, celebrating the holy activities in the month, participating somewhat, to what degree they can, in Taraweeh prayers. I think the night prayers are especially powerful experiences for children. They don't necessarily have to be there for all 20 rakahs or the whole night or whatever it is that the community is doing, but to be at least to taste a bit of that, to feel the energy in the air in the masjid and see all these people praying and who are not typically there, on the average day. The child would take notice of that, and maybe that memory will plant something in them, for later on in their life. So I think any way in which the community can include children. Sometimes communities are actually not very friendly towards children, during that time of the year, during Ramadan, because people want to focus on their own spiritual practice, their own prayers, their own recitation of Quran, and they might find the presence of children to be distracting at the least, and at the most, disruptive. But I don't think that should be a general policy. I understand that in certain circumstances, maybe children, would be better off at home or asleep. But it is important for them to, like I said, taste it a little bit, to have some limited experience of that, just so they get the idea that this is a larger Muslim community thing. It's not just our family doing it. Like, you go out, you see hundreds of people at the masjid. So that could be an eye-opening experience for the child, and help them feel connected to the greater community. And some communities do go even further. They actually prepare children's programs so that while the adults are doing something, there might be children activities going on that are supervised. And I think those are great. I think they shouldn't be completely separated, because the children should at least still witness what is happening and have the exposure to it. But at the same time, I understand that they shouldn't be disrupting the general community's activities.
So we're going to continue to talk about this issue with Dr. Omar. When we come back, we're going to take a short break for our sponsor.
Hi, welcome to Adelante. This is Adelante Recovery, and my name is Yvette Kuglin, and I'm part of the staff.
Adelante Recovery Center has helped people in dual diagnosis for 5 years. We accept most PPO insurances and provide luxury accommodations and 24-hour support. To speak with an admissions counselor, call 1-888 242-4450.
A lot of time we don't even know what's wrong with us, and sometimes we need to get away to figure that out. So if you want to go for a little retreat out in Corona del Mar, which is a confidential location, we're here to help. So we're only a phone call away. Thank you.
Welcome back to Muslims and Mental Health. Today we're joined by Dr. Omar Mahmood, who is a neuropsychologist specializing in psychological assessment, and we're discussing how children can best utilize Ramadan. We're going to continue where we left off and ask you how children can best experience the larger dominant community during this month of fasting.
Yeah, so I think in general, our children will benefit from feeling integrated or connected to the larger society as well as their own, personal, religious, spiritual community. And one major way to do that is just through service. If children can feel that there are needs that they can fulfill, in the greater society. So some communities have efforts where they'll help feed the homeless or do participate in community cleanups or do some type of volunteer work that benefits people in the larger community. I think that in general should be a policy for Muslim parents to instill in their children. Specifically in Ramadan, I think there's just the added benefit of it being a holy time of the year, a time in which mercy is emphasized and sort of sharing blessings with others. And so if there could be some effort during the month for families to engage in that type of volunteerism, that type of community service where the children can participate, I think is a great way, but tying it into how this is part of our spiritual tradition and tying it into how, especially in Ramadan, there's extra blessings, associated with helping others and showing, doing charitable deeds and things like that. So I think that's one way.
You actually are a board member of Access California Services, which is a social service organization that supports Arabs and Muslims in Southern California. And I'm wondering just now if there's something going on at Access during Ramadan.
That's a good question. We do every year have a toy drive where the idea is to share toys for many times children some of them are from poorer families or from refugee families that do not have the means to, give their kids gifts on Eid. And so we'll do a toy drive during the month of Ramadan to distribute some of those toys at the end of the month on Eid to the children that, whose families couldn't do that for them. And that would be a great thing, actually, to get children involved with. For example, your child, if you're a Muslim family and want to participate, your child could actually even take a more active role and maybe pick out the toy that they know is going to go to a child in need. And that also gives them the sense of accomplishment, a sense of active participation in the sharing of blessings, and it helps them realize that, there are people who are less fortunate maybe than I am at this moment, and I can do some act to help them. So that's one of our main activities. The other thing that we tend to focus on in Ramadan at Access is actually going to a lot of masjids and Islamic community centers and basically telling people about what it is that Access does and trying to get the community more involved in social services in general and understand how it benefits the greater, our society, our particular community, and the greater society.
So if someone were to be interested in participating in the toy drive or other things that Access is doing, how could they contact Access?
Well, there's our website, accesscal.org, where Access California Services is on Facebook as well. If you just search for Access California, you should be able to find it.
Okay.
And there's always information posted on our Facebook and our Twitter.
Okay, great. So moving on, how can clinicians, we're going to switch gears a little bit here, how can clinicians help children during Ramadan and what should they be considering in their treatment to be sensitive to this time of year.
Okay. And is the question more for like just general clinicians or?
Right, because our audience, consists of both the Muslim community and then other clinicians who may not be Muslim,
Okay.
And just learning about Ramadan now.
Yeah, no, I think, well, it'll be similar in the way that any child from any other tradition, if has a major holiday or, celebration time of year, where they can feel more connected to their community, feel more connected to their heritage.
Mm-hmm.
These are things that are always helpful for children and protective in a way because, they feel like they belong somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And so if a clinician is dealing with a Muslim child or is working with a Muslim child who is vulnerable or feels isolated, this is one way which even in a theoretical sense helps the child to think about the greater Muslim world and how they're all celebrating at this time of year, and simply by fasting or doing an act of charity or going to the masjid during this time, you're participating in this larger activity that Muslims around the world are participating in. Mm-hmm. And so that can be really helpful to someone who's feeling disjointed or separated from their community, that even just through the act itself, even if they're not physically with these same people, they're sort of part of the group. Also, Ramadan is a time for self-reflection and, as we mentioned, self-discipline. And so it can be another way to sort of encourage a child to, if there's certain behaviors that they're trying to promote in the child or certain ways they're trying to encourage and motivate the child to take steps towards more healthy behaviors. Mm-hmm. Just the general sense that they're in this special time of the year can be helpful. Just that there are other people who have their struggles and they're sort of striving to discipline their souls and their egos, and so it's a way to help the child not feel alone in that struggle for self-improvement or a particular goal that they're trying to reach. That there are a number of people in the community who are all, focused on some self-discipline and reaching certain goals during the month.
Yeah, I really like your reframing of the importance of including children during this month, and how there is that balance between the individual and the communal obligation. Because oftentimes I think you hit the nail on the head about not including them, mm-hmm. and how important it is. I really like that. And I think that hopefully they'll give people some food for thought about that, because I'm not sure we have thought through that in all of our communities all the way that we should.
Yeah. You probably know. Islamic centers and masjids have a great variation in how they deal with the children in their communities. And for some places, the masjid or the Islamic center is a very welcoming and thriving place for children to be. But in other places, it's not very welcoming, mm-hmm. unfortunately. And that just does not serve us as a community in general to have our children bear any ill will towards the larger Muslim community. It just, especially when you're a religious minority in a country that doesn't share your beliefs.
Well, and developmentally, right? Because the continuum, what you describe of what they learn now and how that will impact them as they grow up, mm-hmm. To have had that consistent experience with it, as opposed to we don't have that experience and then all of a sudden we have it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So with that, looking at the larger scale globally, we know that our Muslim community globally is facing many challenges and very different circumstances during the month of Ramadan. For example, some people are not aware that in Egypt, for example, sometimes they run out of rice during Ramadan, which is not a problem that we have here in the United States. And so, and recognizing that part of Ramadan is a commitment to charitable acts, what are the ways in which American children could contribute to children worldwide during Ramadan?
That's interesting. I haven't thought about too many specific ways, because there's so many different conflicts that are happening around the world, so many places around the world where children are unfortunately suffering. And during Ramadan, it just kind of, I think one of the main, sort of negative aspects of all that is that for some children in different parts of the Muslim world, their experience during Ramadan is unfortunately not as vibrant, as children in places where things are stable. Mm-hmm. And so for them, it's like they're missing out on something. And for Muslim children in America, I think one is initially it's just kind of helping them understand this concept, like what you're experiencing is not maybe what other kids are experiencing in certain parts of the Muslim world, and kind of educating them in that way. It doesn't have to be very morbid, or scary, which sometimes it can be presented that way, but just helping them understand that some kids are, while you're happy and you're joyous during this time, there are some kids who have other issues that are, greater than their immediate experience, that are, there are circumstances and forces around them that these children cannot control. And so their experience may be in some way they're deprived of the same experience that children in America might be having.
It sounds like you're talking about just raising their awareness.
Yeah, just raising their awareness to help them feel, to encourage them to feel empathy towards these children. Because I don't know what direct action they can actually do. I think it would be interesting though if there was some way that they could design Ramadan cards or Eid cards, if that perhaps some charitable organization could share with children around the world, or if not, at least design something that could be posted on the internet so that children around the world could see it at some point. And it helps them show, it's a way for them to communicate, to express that, hey, I'm thinking about you, another child, wherever you are, and you and I are the same in some ways, and I would like to share, at least a moment of joy with you, or something symbolic showing that, this is what I hope you will experience, even if you can't maybe at this moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds great. So, so what, can I ask you a personal question? Like, what was Ramadan like for you as a child?
Yes, Ramadan for me as a young child, it sort of varied because although my father was raised in a Muslim family, my mother was raised Catholic. Mm-hmm. And when we were young children, we didn't necessarily have one particular religious upbringing. At one point, my mom was thinking about, taking us to the masjid one day and then taking us to mass the next day, and giving us both experiences. And then there was a time I specifically remember in my childhood when my mom decided we'll just stick with Islam and raise the children as Muslims. Mm-hmm. And my mom actually was learning Salah, prayer with us as the kids. Oh. So we were like learning how to say Fatiha together, how to do the movements in the prayer together. So for us, our Islamic experiences were kind of non-traditional in that sense. We didn't, early in our childhood, it probably was very vague and not very detailed, but later in our childhood, and particularly times when we would travel overseas to visit my cousins, for example, on my father's side, I do distinctly remember being there for Ramadan, and I wasn't old enough to really fast the whole day, and it was summer, so they were long days. But I remember breaking my fast at a certain point, or having like some little candy or something to kind of suck on, and my cousins kind of telling me, well, that doesn't really, something you can do when you're fasting, and sort of the festivity at night and these type of things. And then a little bit later in my childhood, then I have more specific memories of, going to Taraweeh prayers and remembering breaking fast at people's houses. I think for me, it was a very socially, stimulating experience, because you're going to different people's houses, maybe uncles and aunties that you don't see very often, and during that time of year it's very happy and there's a lot of great food, you know. So I have a lot of those sort of socially engaging experiences and memories of that time. But early on in my childhood, it was a little bit non-traditional.
Well, thank you for sharing that, because I think that it's great to show, what everybody goes through, not just the ideal. And so I really appreciate you being willing to share that with us.
Yeah.
So now I'd like to transition, and as we conclude this episode of Muslims and Mental Health, to our fun questions that we like to ask all our interviewees.
Okay.
So who is your Muslim hero and why, if you have one?
So I guess, I'll exclude the Prophet Muhammad because he's all of our heroes. But I think if you're talking about Muslims in America, for me, probably like many of people in my generation, it's Malcolm X, it's Al-Hajj Malik Shabazz, because there were just certain things that I think he did, and the more I learn about his life, that paved the way really for later generations of Muslims to even just exist with a level of comfort in America. He would say things on national television, talking about Allah and the Messenger of Allah and the Prophet Muhammad and his experience in Mecca, and how he was probably the first person to say some of these words like on national TV and just normalize it, at least in the vocabulary of people, so that for later generations of Muslims who we might not even realize that like he did us this great service, in kind of making Islam something that is part of the parlance in America. It's part of the fabric of segments of American society. That's undeniable now, and I think we owe him a great debt of gratitude for that. So he's one of my biggest heroes.
Okay, and what is your favorite concept in Islam and why?
My favorite concept is going to be mercy. The Prophet ﷺ is the messenger of mercy. He's sent as a mercy to all, and it's such a deep concept for me because ultimately we can't really do anything or go anywhere without the mercy of God, and that's such a powerful thing. And that the fact that His mercy is greater than anything really, so for me, the fact that He is the most merciful, that Allah is the most merciful, but also that people on their day-to-day activities and levels of interaction, that they can show some level of mercy to one another. And that is such a powerful thing to do, because I think it is incredibly powerful to show mercy when you could show anger or you could show some other, lower emotion. Even if it's your right to do so, I think to withhold that right and still show mercy is so powerful, because it's not necessarily the quickest reaction that one might expect. It's something that requires some discipline. It requires some higher level of thinking and spiritual practice to do that. So that's probably my favorite concept.
And then what would your favorite word be and why?
That's a hard one. I don't know what my favorite word would be. I really don't know. If you're talking about Arabic, in Arabic, I think there's the word, there's the root word hamada, which is, it means to praise. It's the same root word as the name Muhammad and Ahmed and even my last name, Mahmood. And so maybe it was something very salient to me, like when I was learning Arabic. And it's part of the phrase, Alhamdulillah, when we say thanks and praise be to Allah. So it's just it's so versatile, that word, and it can be used in many different contexts, and yet it kind of always points towards the divine. So that's one of them, I guess.
That will work.
All right.
All right. Well, great. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing with us. It's very helpful, and I think people will really get something out of this segment. So thank you.
Well, thank you for having me.
So this concludes another episode of Muslims and Mental Health. We are glad you joined us today, and we would really appreciate your comments, concerns, feedback, any ideas you have about future shows, and you can contact us at nafshealertherapy@gmail.com. That's NAFSHEALER therapy@gmail.com. Thank you.